If you're a crafter, stamper, or cyanotype printmaker, and you're tired of standing there at the card shop looking at $7, $8, and even $9 and $10 greeting cards, this video is for you. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create cyanotype papers that can be used as backgrounds for simple stamped images. Put them all together and you have lovely little cards that are great for writing personal notes or adding to gifts. If you've never done the cyanotype process, I do have a video and I'll share the link to that video underneath this lesson. The first thing to do is prepare your papers. I have them taped down to some cardboard and I like to go back and forth in every direction to saturate the papers well. The first one I'm going to sprinkle with some salt. This is that large grain cooking salt. Works really well for this. And then I'm going to spray it with a spray bottle with a 50-50 water and vinegar solution. And I'll spray that. You can see that my cyanotype solution is already looking a little blue. I'm not worried about the darkness of the room I'm in or anything like that. I'm just going for it for this one. Then my second one, I'm going to spray first with some water. And then once the water is on there, I'm going to sprinkle it with salt. There's no vinegar or baking soda or anything else in this water. It's just water and sprinkled salt. So I'll get a slightly different effect when this is all finished. The last piece that I make, actually I'm going to do 2 of these so I have plenty, is going to simply be a piece of paper that has been saturated in every direction, up, down, diagonal, to get that solution in there really well. And that'll be exposed to sunlight as is, with no additions. Once your pieces have been in the sunlight, I leave mine roughly an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. Right now it's mid-September in Southwest Ohio, so I don't have the intense mid-afternoon sunlight that I might get in July or August. So I leave them out a little bit longer. The rinsing I do out in the backyard whenever possible. I use tubs of water and just make sure that by the time I'm considering them finished, my water is no longer looking yellow. It's running clear when I get all finished. I can let them sit outside to dry. I usually put them in the shade, although it really doesn't make much difference at this point, because at this point you no longer have reactive cyanotype solution on your paper. So they'll just dry, and gradually you'll see that deepening of color. At first you'll think, oh, this isn't working, and then after the paper dries, you're going to see that it looks really good. These are the finished ones. The one on the left had the vinegar. The one on the right was just the water and salt, and these last 2 were the plain paper. So with the vinegar added to your water, you're going to get some real interesting color and texture. The next step is to measure the size that you're going to need for the opening. This is about 4 1/4 by 3 inches. Then you want to add about 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So I would do a 4 3/4 by 3 1/2 inch piece of my paper. So I'm going to use my ruler to find the most efficient way to measure off my paper, knowing that I want 3 1/2 by 4 3/4 for this particular one. Once I have everything measured off, then I'm going to cut the pieces out and get them ready to use. When I did my measuring, you'll notice those are white lines. I'm using a chalk pencil. A chalk pencil works well, or just a white colored pencil. Those edges are not going to show, so even if you have a little bit of that white color left, it really isn't going to make any difference. The important thing is that you leave that 1/4 of an inch all the way around your pieces so that they don't fall out of that opening in your little cards. The next step in this project is to use your solid colored cyanotype paper to stamp on the designs that you're going to use for your image that you'll glue down. And what I like to use for this, I'm primarily a big fan of gold metallics, but you can use any acrylic paint and this will work just fine. I like these wooden
stamps. You can get these on Amazon or sometimes at just your local craft shop. They're nice, they're sturdy, they're easy to clean, and I think they give you a really good impression. If you don't have any of those on hand, these commercially produced ones that you find at your local Hobby Lobby or craft shop, Joann's, Michael's, those will work just fine as well. But I'm going to go ahead and just use these because I like those stencils. You're also going to want to have on hand some baby wipes. Baby wipes are great for cleaning up acrylic paints on your hands and on your tools so that you have very minimal paint going down the drains when you finish the washing process. I'm going to be using a paintbrush. Some people prefer to roll their paint out on a palette or a piece of paper and then put their stamp on it as if it were a stamp pad. I prefer to brush my paints on. It's just a personal preference. For my paints, I'm a little bit partial to Liquitex, mainly because they're available locally for me. I can usually get what I want, but sometimes they have a nice stock of golden colors as well. These are all metallics. This is rich copper. This one is iridescent rich gold. This one is bronze, which is also a nice brown gold. This is a bright gold, which is a little lighter and a little more transparent. This is silver, and I also have another bright gold, golden brand. So I have a variety, and I'll demonstrate with a variety of colors. I like to roll my paints out or brush my paints out on a paper palette because it's disposable. I reuse them a lot until they're just too cluttered up to reuse. You can also use a styrofoam or paper plate or just a piece of foil or paper, wax paper, whatever you happen to have on hand to roll out your paints or spread out your paints. You're also going to want to have some type of padding underneath. I like to put a piece of old felt underneath the paper that I'm going to be stamping on. I find that I get a slightly better impression if I have that little bit of give underneath there. So to get started, I'm just going to spread out a little bit of rich, this is heavy body, which is a thicker acrylic, a little bit of rich gold. And I don't have a whole lot left. Let's see if we can get here. There we go, a little rich gold. And then I'm going to brush that on this shell, just like so. Because these are cut very deep, you don't have to worry too much about any paint that goes down in there. Just make sure that you have the surface covered well. And then I'm just going to go straight down, press, and pull straight up. Now that one you can see is a little bit light. That tells me that I did not put quite enough paint on there. So another alternative is to spread your paint out. You can use a brayer if you happen to have one, but that will tend to make your paint a little thinner. See what I get now. Try another one. Press and pull. Much, much better. So I have a nice impression on that one. And I don't worry about measuring spaces between these because these are going to dry and then be cut out. I don't like to let paint dry on my stamps, so I immediately take a baby wipe and get as much paint as possible off. And then I leave the baby wipe around it until I have a chance to take it to the sink and wash it off. Okay, that was the gold. Let's try a little copper. going to just use my baby wipe to wipe off my brush. And let's try, let's make a little copper fish. And I think I'm going to go directly to this method. It's working out really well. Do a little one here. Get my fish. Looks good. And fit my fish in. And there's copper. And again, clean it off. CC gold, copper, and I'll do a little silver just so that we have the full complement of colors. Clean my brush. Although it really doesn't matter if you get a little mixing of colors, that can be very attractive too. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. And this one I'm going to do the dragonfly. It's not as deeply cut. So I'm going to brush first. And I'm just going to try a stamp with only the brushing. Press and lift. It's a little light, so add a little more paint and try again. Nice. And just to give you a little idea of what happens if you just kind of mix your colors, I'm going to go from silver to gold. And stamp. Kind of pretty. And while I've got the same one out, I'll go from gold to copper. Here's all my prints. I have some little combos where I was just using up leftover paint, and some of them didn't come out as clear a print as others, but once these are dry, I'll show you a few things that you can do to improve on that if you need to. But while they're drying, what I want to do is show you a little bit about how I cleaned up my stamps. And this works whether they're the kind you buy at a craft store or whether you order these wooden ones. In order to make sure all of your ink is out, I use the baby wipes first, or I'm sorry, the paint. I use the baby wipes first to get most of it off. And then under hot warm running water and a little bit of soap, any kind of soap will do, I scrub them with an old toothbrush and scrub them really good and then rinse them. And then I turn them face down on some paper towels in order to let the water all drain out. And there'll be some staining, and there might even be a little bit of paint that doesn't quite come out of smaller areas. And you can later on, if you want to, just to kind of clean them up, sometimes just a little straight pen is all you need just to go in there and be real gentle, but just kind of pick out any paint that didn't quite clean out. I don't usually worry too much about it. As long as I've cleaned the surfaces, there'll be some color staining, that's inevitable. But when you have these little tiny holes like you do on these starfish, you can sometimes just get some of that excess paint out and let it dry. And then those will dry. I'll let them dry upside down for a while, and then I'll flip them over on a dry paper towel and wait wait for them to dry. So a little bit of cleanup tip. Once your stamped paint is dry, I use these little craft scissors, just some little tiny craft scissors, to cut around each of them. And I like to leave just a little blue edge around there. I just think it helps it stand out against your backgrounds later when you glue it down. Now sometimes you have one that comes out really good, like this shell right here, and other times not so much. It didn't quite print as well as you'd like it to. There is a fix for that. These are Pen Touch, which are little paint pens made by the Sakura company. I get them on Amazon, but you can occasionally find them in a craft store. I have them in copper, gold, and silver because those are the metallic paints I stamp with the most often. And my preferred size for this is the smallest point, which is a 0.7. I think it's kind of hard to see here, but I believe it's 0.7 millimeters, so very small point. And once you have these, you shake them up, and they have a nice fine tip, and you can go over your image. Let me bring this in a little bit. There we go. And you can go over the image and add a little bit more of color where things didn't print as clearly as you would have liked. So I do that a lot as little touch-ups, and it blends beautifully with your acrylic inks because it is a metallic paint that's coming out of your pen. So it's a good way to fix them up. You can use your good print or another stamp to kind of get a feel for where those lines need to be and just put them in. Super simple and a great way to make it all work. Just like that. And then that can be cut out and used. The next step is to put this all together. And for this, I'm going to be using these pieces of, they're like a plasticky stuff I cut up from, you can use, I'm not even sure where these came from. They were some packing material or something in between other things that I had ordered, and I cut them off. You can also use saran wrap, parchment paper, any of those kinds of wax paper, kitchen products. That's just going to be for the drying stage. I like to use, this is matte fluid medium or matte medium. You can get this at craft supply stores, art supply stores. I use it for so many different things that it makes sense for me to use it as my glue. I don't have any right now, but if you have Mod Podge, that makes an excellent glue for this. And if all you have on hand is something like Elmer's Glue All, that works too, because we're just gluing paper together, so we don't need anything too spectacular. I like to put my glue in an old egg carton lid, and I like to spread my glue with one of these little foam brushes. Just makes everything very easy. The first thing to do is to put paper that you've printed, your pattern paper, into the card the way you want it to go. And I chose this one because it has a nice bubbly kind of effect that I really like. And I'm thinking about using my little copper fish in this one. And I'm thinking I may add some little painted copper bubbles on that. So I'm going to place it here. The reason you want to have the paper already inserted in the card is so that you can be sure that everything is lined up and in position the way you want it to be. If I wanted to use the shell, I might want another shell with that to double it. I don't think I particularly care for that. So I'm just going to, for now, glue this little fish down because I like him. So I'm going to take a little bit of my matte medium and just pour a little bit in here like that. You don't need very much. And then I'm going to turn this over and spread the medium. Spread your glue or your matte medium, your Mod Podge, whatever you're using as your then press it into place on the card. And then I like to put something heavy on top of it in order to make sure that all the edges are adhered really well. And that's where this plasticky material comes in handy. I can put that on top, and then I can lay a book or another heavy object on top of this. I can even layer some more cards and then leave it that way for a little while. So I have this box here. I can put this box on top of it and just leave it in place. Usually an hour or two, I'll just walk away and come back and just let it dry. Okay, my card is dry. Everything is in place. And I had mentioned the thought about putting some little bubbles here with my fish. And what I did is I dug out some just tube things. I saved, like this covered a brush at one point, a brush tip. These were some kind of straw things that I got with I think this was a straw from a water bottle that I no longer have. So I spread a little bit of my copper paint, and I'm going to dip these little straws in place and just tap a few little bubbles, gradually going up in size. These bigger ones do tend to work a little nicer. Just for fun. These bigger ones I like better. And if I wanted to give them a little shimmer, which I could easily do, I could take a little bit of glitter glue or sprinkle a little glitter on it while it's wet. There's a lot of little things like that you can do to bring them out. The other thing I like to do on the open end, and I forgot to mention this when I was demonstrating gluing the piece on, is to take a little bit of my glue and just add a tiny bit of glue here on the edge of the card and press it down. And that seals that side of the card so that your paper on the inside, your inset, isn't going to slide around or lose its place. And then your card is ready. You can sign it on the bottom or sign it on the back, and you have a really sweet little note card. If you'd like to learn more about the cyanotype process, I'll have a link under here to my YouTube video for beginners, a little bit about how to use the chemicals that I mixed up and how to do some simple cyanotype processes. I'll also leave a link in the comments, the first of the comments, I'll put in there a link to those Sakura pens that I like to use, because sometimes they are a little hard to find locally, and it is really easy to find them on Amazon.